My name's Andrew Whale, I'm a vet from Southwest Victoria. This fit to join project we did 2 years ago, and I guess the main aim that we were trying to get from it was to better identify what sheep we should be keeping for another 12 months on farm. It was at the time when the drought had broken and livestock prices were starting to really shoot up. We thought, well, how do we make use of what we've got? And I guess there's two pretty clear outcomes from it. One is we can keep older sheep than probably what traditionally a lot of people have kept, but also there's a lot of unproductive sheep within our 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old sheep that we need to be identifying and moving on because there's no money in keeping them. And this idea that I'll give them a chance, see what happens, it just doesn't make sense. The first rule is anything with a bad udder's got to go. And I guess what we have found is a lot of people just aren't doing an udder assessment on their sheep at all, and the timing of that's really critical. So some people do it at weaning. You'll only pick up on about half the sheep with mastitis if you do it at weaning, because about half of the mastitis cases will develop in the first 3 weeks post-weaning. So ideally we're doing it about a month after weaning, but 3 months after weaning, and that fits in with shearing, that's awesome too. But sometime between a month post-weaning and probably pregnancy testing, and that'll depend on how much feed you got on your farm. And some people, they'll run through because they've got the feed and they want to shear. Others, they're going into a feed limiting time. Well, let's just get it done and get rid of them. So that's the first one, and I've got some sheep there with some udders that I'll show you. And then everything else, we run a 2-strike policy, and that's condition, its age, its teeth, and its lameness. And I guess the idea is that if you've got a 3-year-old sheep that's light in condition, but otherwise she's great, we'll give her a chance to improve, because there's every chance with a drench, you said 4 parasites, with a drench and good feed, we can get her to bounce back. But if she's 6-year-old and she's losing condition, there's probably some issues and she's not going to bounce back from that. So it's this 2-strike policy for everything else. And similarly, lame sheep, if a sheep is lame, but she's in great condition, the lameness actually isn't affecting her, and it's not a reason to get rid of her. But if she's lame and she's as thin as that, the green dot is you over the back, clearly she's not handling the conditions and we need to move her on. Teeth, same thing. If they're old and their teeth are no good, they're losing condition, let's get rid of them. But if the teeth look ordinary, but the sheep's one of the fattest sheep in the mob, we'll keep up. And on the condition score, we essentially came up with a rule that if they're 1 condition score below the mob average, that's the high risk group that we want to be moving on. And it was really clear. We're really clear about the point that they had to be, it's off the mob average. It's not an absolute number, because there's some farms that are run really tough, and they're all, some people would consider them all to be skinny. But we're looking for the sheep that aren't handling the environment, and therefore they're a 1 condition score off the average. So it's not every sheep that's under 2.5, because if you've got a whole farm that averages 2.5, well, clearly we're not getting rid of half the farm. So just thinking about that. And I guess what we found was there's typically sort of 7 or 8% of ewes, and this depends on the breed a little bit, but with mastitis in a flock that people would otherwise be running. And these are in farms that were actually keeping, they were wet and drying ewes at marking, and they were only keeping ewes that were raising lambs, and they still found that many with problems. So particularly bad in the crossbred sheep. So we had 3 farms in this case study: a merino, a composite, and a first cross ewe flock. And we sort of sat around that 8-9% in the crossbred and composite flock, and it was more like a 3% in the merinos. So we probably don't have a heap of evidence, but we feel, and talking to enough people that are doing this now, we're not finding the mastitis rates in merinos, and we put that probably back to milk production. They're not high milk producing sheep, and if you think about dairy cattle versus beef cattle, we tend not to see a lot of mastitis in beef cows like we do dairy cows. So we think it's that high producing animal that's higher risk of, and essentially because the milk is coming, there's more milk coming through and the teat sphincters open more, there's more likely that bacteria will be able to go up that teat sphincter and cause mastitis. So that's essentially the guidelines we've given people is you've got to assess your sheep before you decide which ones to run through. The udders is the big take home, but look at the rest. I reckon a lot of people have, and you said you'll trade those old sheep. There's a lot of sheep that go and get the head stopped off that have raised a lamb every bloody year of their life. They're the most productive sheep. We know they're going to scan the house down. Let's keep them and run them for another year. Probably just do have to be a little bit careful. They will be the first group to fall over if we nutritionally compromise them and parasites. So they may need a bit of extra love. but can be really, really profitable sheep to run for another 12 months. Obviously, we need to make money farming, but we also want to be good from a welfare perspective. And it was great that we were able to improve both of those elements in these farming scenarios. So economic analysis done by Basil Burnham from Tasmania put it at about $4 to $8 increase in farm profit for every year that you do this too. And better land survival outcome, better ewe mortality, reduction in ewe mortality. So piecing all that together, it's not always the case that you can get better welfare and more money on farm, but it's great when you can tick both those boxes